Cunningham's agent, Jeff Schwartz, spoke about the 65-game rule, telling ESPN's Shams Charania, quote, Cade has delivered a first-team All-NBA season if he falls just short of an arbitrary games played threshold due to a legitimate injury. It should not disqualify him from recognition he has clearly earned over the course of the season. The league should be rewarding excellence, not enforcing rigid cutoffs that ignore context. An exception needs to be made, end quote. Okay, so that was Cade's agent. Now here's Jaylen Brown, another MVP candidate on the 65-game rule. Okay, can we agree with both of them? Okay, the question now, should the NBA abolish the 65-game rule? Stephen A., what do you think?
No, they shouldn't. And I completely agree with Jaylen Brown and his perspective. I understand where agent Jeff Schwartz is coming from, but respectfully, sit down. I ain't trying to hear that from him. You know why? Because when his players, if I'm not saying that I know this to be the case in terms of his specific players that he represents, but when players were missing games, when they were abusing the system, when they were engaging in load management, when they were taking nights off, did he open his mouth then? No, he did not. Then we don't want to hear from you now. It's just that simple. Cade Cunningham deserves to be a strong consideration for all NBA first team. He clearly was an MVP candidate for most of the season. He's an absolute stud and a star in the making. He's a star in this league, ascending the superstar status. The brother's special, no doubt about that. And it's not his fault because that's a legitimate injury with a partially collapsed lung. We get all of that. Nobody's questioning anything about that with Cade Cunningham. But there is something to be said about the players bringing it on themselves. The league didn't want to do this. The league wasn't thinking about doing this, just like the league didn't want to make modifications to NBA All-Star Weekend. But player participation or lack thereof, player enthusiasm or flagrant lack thereof, along with other things, contributed to the league trying to make adjustments because it had sponsors, advertisers, and most importantly, its overall fan base to pay attention to. They did it to themselves. And that's what we're talking about here. We had cats getting contracts, okay? And I know this for a fact, and Jeff Schwartz knows it better than me. You had guys getting contracts and literally plotting for the next contract before they even took a second to honor the one they just signed. All right, how many games I'm going to miss? How often am I going to sit out? I'm not putting in this amount of work, blah, blah, blah. It's really about being ready for the playoffs, April, May, and June. It's really not about those first 6 months, blah, blah, blah. We saw this. We didn't just hear about it, we saw it. And if you weren't so flagrantly disrespectful to the game and the fans who support the game for so many years, not recent, this year's been better, and they deserve to recognize that. But on too many occasions, you had players, you had agents, you had teams, because it's not always the players' fault. Sometimes it's the teams that's forcing them to do stuff as well, that were completely dismissive of the fans. When Steve Kerr opened his mouth and talked about shortening the season and stuff like that, certainly he knows he's a champion. Champion as a player, champion as a coach. Mad respect to him. Nobody wants to hear that from him. You know why? Because are you trying to say that justified you showing up to a game and benching 4 of your 5 starters for the fans? You couldn't parse it out and make sure you bench one guy here and give him a day's rest and another guy here. No, you got to sit 3 or 4 dudes down at the same time. There's a couple of occasions that Steve Kerr did that. We've seen others do it as well with no regard to the fans. And then he'll come and say, well, I'm really sorry. I hated doing it. Well, you didn't have to. You didn't have to. You chose to. And that's the kind of stuff that we're talking about here. And we're talking about people that's getting months off when you got 4 to 6 months off the year. So we got to take that into consideration as well. I'm not saying this is ideal. Certainly the 65-game rule is not ideal. Context matters, and things need to be taken into consideration. I'm not against any of that. But that's after you acknowledge you brought it on yourselves and you forced and compelled the NBA to do this because of your dereliction of duty as players, as agents, as teams along the way that forced the league's hand. You did this. So guess what? Problems come with it. Problems you created.
100%, Steve. And Kerr's a phony. I mean, I come to New York there on Sunday and bench all those guys in New York, the one visit of the year. I mean, you got to be kidding me, kid. I mean, that's what you do. And you're telling me, and you play with Jordan, who played 82 games every single year. And you know what? The heck with Jeff Schwartz. Sit down. Nobody wants to hear from an agent regarding this. There's plenty of athletes in every sport known to man that have had injuries, unfortunate injuries, that have cut off postseason awards. I can go give you Wilt Chamberlain tore his his ACL, played 40 games in 1969-70, would have won the MVP. Sandy Koufax had a circular problem in his fingers in 1962. He would have won a Cy Young with, you wouldn't believe, didn't pitch the last 2 months.
Yeah, but this
is sports. This is sport. Injuries happen.
Okay.
This is sports. That's the way it is. It's unfortunate. I feel bad for him. But we don't make any exceptions now because you're annoyed that one of your players had an injury. Tough. This is professional sports. Sometimes it bounces your way. Sometimes it doesn't. You can't give the guy the MVP for playing 61 games. It's absurd. So he's wrong.
I have something to say. Go ahead, Shay, but make sure before we go to commercial break, I got some numbers to give y'all.
I was gonna ask a question. I hear what you're saying, but those instances you brought up, there wasn't this 65-game rule. There wasn't a rule in place. That was just the way the cookie crumbled. But now there's a specific number, and Cade is a specific instance with a serious injury.
Well, you got to have a number. You got to have some barometer.
You got to have a number,
what
Shay.
are you going to do, 40 games, 50 games?
No.
You got to have something.
I like the number. My question is now, though, maybe there's an exception to the rule.
No.
Maybe you could appeal it or do something because he has a very specific instance here.
Tell me. No, Doggy, I like what Shay just brought up. That appeal process. Like, for example, if you're Cade Cunningham, right, and you've been medically diagnosed with a collapsed lung.
Serious.
And you were on pace to play 70 games, and that derailed you. You can make an appeal to the league, and the league could say, these were exigent circumstances. Obviously, this is extreme, and that's why he didn't make the 65-game threshold. So in other words, some kind of caveat that allows you to challenge it on a case-by-case basis, subject to the league. I think we could be open to that because the NFL, it's just like Roger Goodell and them. They'll make a ruling, and then you appeal it, and then you got to go to them for the arbitration, et cetera, and it could be upheld or it could be changed. I get that. But Doggy and Shay, before I go back to y'all, put Shay and Doggy up on the screen for me, please. I got to read these numbers to y'all. This is very, very significant when it comes to the 65-game rule. Last season, because the 65-game rule came into effect 2023-2024 season, a couple years ago, right? Last season, 77% of All-Stars in the NBA played in at least 65 games. The year before the rule was instituted, do you know what that number was? 59%. It increased by 18%. It can increase by 18% once the 65-game rule came into play. That's number one. 10 years ago, Doggy, in terms of All-Stars playing in at least 65 games, do you know what that number was at? 10 years ago?
All-Stars, 65. I'm going to say about 52%. How's that?
Guess.
92%.
Oh, wow, really? Wow.
10 years ago, 92% of NBA All-Stars played in at least 65 games. And then somehow, some way, over the next 9 years, they allowed that to dip to 59%. That is the evidence that the NBA leaned on to highlight how dismissive All-Stars had become towards honoring their commitment to playing as many games as they possibly could during the regular season, which forced the 65-game rule to come into play. If I know that, I know that, Jeff Schwartz knows that. Sit down. You know better. Stop that. They did it to themselves. That's why we're all here. That's why they look at us and go off about us going off on them, because they want to ignore the numbers. These are the numbers. 92% a decade ago, not 30 years ago, not 40 years ago, a decade ago.
Good job.
92% of the All-Stars played at least 65 games, and you allowed it to drop to 59% in the 2023 season. Come on now. You did it to yourself.
Yeah.
Excellent
You
job.
did it to yourself.
Good stat.
Nothing annoys me more than load management. I'm just saying, with Cade Cunningham and this severe of an injury, it does feel
How
like
about if a guy,
that's a special
what if a
case.
guy has a sprained ankle? We're going to make an
Cade's a
exception for
special
him
case.
too?
No.
So how do we
people
make the
play
exception?
on sprained ankles in a
how
much
about if the
quicker
doctor says he
fashion
can't
than
play?
a collapsed lung.
But how about if a guy says he can't play with a sprained ankle? So when are you supposed to make the
you
difference?
could potentially come back on a sprained ankle much faster than you could a collapsed lung. I mean, that.
Well, he's going to play. He's supposedly he only has to play 4 or 5 games.
5, yes. Go ahead.
Yesterday on my radio show, Stephen A. Smith Show, Mad Dog Sports Radio.
No, Stephen A. Smith Radio. Go ahead. Take it away.
You understand what I'm saying? It's your channel. Yesterday, I had the former executive director of the Players Association, Charlie Grantham, on the show with yours truly. And what he always brings up, no matter what we talk about along these lines, is that it's a CBA issue. It's a collective bargaining issue. All of these things get resolved if you put it in a collective bargaining agreement. It ain't in there. Why? Because the Players Association fought it. You fought it, and you facilitated these players being able to get paid while not working 30, 40% of the time. And you didn't think a comeuppance would arrive someday? Come on now. This was inevitable. They brought it on themselves. But Cade Cunningham, special circumstances like that, you should be in a position to file an appeal to the league office, and the league office can make a ruling based on your specific exigent circumstances. That much I agree with Shay about. I do agree with that, Doggy.
You want to come around or no?
No, I'm not.
Okay,
You
you're
may
stay
continue.
firm. That's fine. Our favorite segment of the week is coming up. I missed it last week.
Oh,
I'm
you
excited.
did? We were good last week.
All right, let's bring it again this week. What are we mad about? It's on the way.